In Season 2 of House of the Dragon, King Aegon Targaryen wears a complete suit of Valyrian steel armor. While I've touched on this costume in previous videos, here is my full analysis and breakdown of the costume. As I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of King Aegon II Targaryen's crown, first introduced in House of the Dragon Season 1. However, I do think his suit of armor, with its old-fashioned appearance, complements the dark, weighty aesthetic of Aegon the Conqueror's crown and the bastard sword Blackfyre. Aegon first wears Aegon the Conqueror's Valyrian steel armor in the episode The Burning Mill, but it's not until the Red Dragon and the Gold that we see him in his full suit, complete with the pauldrons and helm. I found the armor's story arc in the show fascinating, from Aegon's initial struggle with the ill-fitting armor to his fully armored ride on Sunfire before being torched by his brother and crashing to the ground, to the maesters removing the steel plates in the episode Regent. It was a compelling journey. This costume was a massive undertaking for the creative team, involving multiple departments. In the behind-the-scenes documentary, The House That Dragons Built, costume designer Joanna Lynch said, "Aegon's armor was a huge challenge for us, both in its design and construction. I've never had so many meetings about a single set of armor in my life." In the books, it's mentioned that Aegon the Conqueror wore a shirt of black scales, greaves, and gauntlets, though there's no mention of it being made from Valyrian steel. However, both his crown and the sword Blackfyre are described as forged by Dragonflame in Valyrian steel. Showrunner Ryan Condal offers some insight into why he tasked the wardrobe and armor teams with this creation. He said, "We hear a lot about Valyrian steel weapons, but not much about Valyrian steel armor. It felt right that Aegon the Conqueror would have had a suit of Valyrian steel armor from his time in Old Valyria, passed down as a House Targaryen family heirloom. Light, yet incredibly strong due to its make, we see him having this ancient armor that's probably been pulled out of some dusty corner of the armory being fitted to him." Costume designer Caroline McCall described the armor as having a slightly brutalist feel to it in terms of the lines, adding that it's all meant to fit within the aesthetic of Old Valyria and the dragons. But practicality is also key. So from a design perspective, McCall wanted the armor to feel articulated and emphasize the importance of its flexibility, especially when riding a dragon would require a great deal of movement and adaptability. Now, in my opinion, the chevron pattern on Aegon's breastplate is reminiscent of Loras Tyrell's green arming doublet that he wore in Game of Thrones. And like Aegon's faction, green is the dominant color of House Tyrell. There's also an historical parallel in the Italian field armor worn by King Henry VIII of England. Furthermore, the armor has this insect-like quality that reminds me of the dragon hunter, which is a type of club-tailed dragonfly, adding another layer to its design. King Aegon's helmet shares a similar shape to the barbute-style helm worn by Targaryen Kingsguard Sir Arthur Dayne in Game of Thrones. The triple comb detail on top of the helm is reminiscent of historical examples like the German Maximilian-style close helm from around 1525 or the 16th century Spanish conquistador's Moray and Cabasset helm. The helm also incorporates Aegon the Conqueror's crown. According to historic royal palaces, it was common in the 14th century for kings to wear crowns on their great helms, allowing them to be easily recognized by their soldiers on the battlefield. This is depicted in 13th and 14th century artwork. The seals of Edward III of England and Robert the Bruce of Scotland both feature them mounted in great helms with crowns. A rare surviving example of a crowned helm, circa 1540, is attributed to Swedish King Gustav Vasa. Aegon the Conqueror's armor, like all the custom armor in the show, was crafted by costume effects supervisor Simon Brindle, who handled its practical application on the actor's body. Brindle, who also worked on Game of Thrones, explained that he began by creating cardboard mock-ups tailored to the actor to provide a 3D representation of the armor. In an interview, Brindle said, "Aegon being a major character in the Westeros universe meant we wanted to create something iconic. Caroline spent a lot of time designing it, and then we developed it. Normally, a build like this takes 16 to 20 weeks, but for a bespoke piece where every element is sized to the actor, each piece must be made from scratch, so it was a 20-week project. The process started with leather mock-ups for adjustment in size and fit. The costume designer would then specify if any elements were too large or small, making changes as needed. Once the leather shapes were finalized, Brindle transitioned to polyurethane and completed the armor with paint. McCall said, "The dragons on the pauldrons were a simplified version that, to me, didn't quite fit in with the ancient Valyrian Targaryen aesthetic. However, there are elements that can still be valuable even if they're not fully understood." Like the details on Daemon's black leather doublet, the design appears to be reminiscent of runes. McCall explains that it became very important to incorporate a significant amount of chainmail as it is such a standard element of medieval armor. The aim was also to introduce scale mail as well, and this was eventually achieved with Aegon, who wore it on his sleeves and skirt. If you look closely, you'll also notice that the metal scales on the sleeves of Aegon's gambeson resemble dragon claws, which also remind me of razor blades. During the Battle of Rook's Rest, as depicted in Fire and Blood, Aegon suffers broken ribs, a fractured hip, and severe burns on half of his body, particularly his left arm. Despite wearing the Valyrian steel armor, which typically offers protection, Aegon was flying drunk, and you might assume his face and arms, not covered by armor, would be the least protected, but it was actually the opposite. Prosthetics designer Waldo Mason explains in a behind-the-scenes video, his burns aren't a direct result of the flame, but from the armor heating up and searing into his skin like a hot plate. Valyrian steel armor in Game of Thrones lore is flame-resistant, unlike regular armor that would just melt. I really appreciate how the show portrays the maesters carefully removing Aegon's armor piece by piece to minimize further injury. His cuirass, made of multiple plates, was meticulously broken down for this scene. McCall noted, "That was a big breakdown job for Tim, our chief of breakdown. He blackened it using some really lovely techniques." David, who specializes in jewelry, made the chainmail look melted to give it an authentic look of something that had been through flames. Ryan Condal was satisfied with the final look, saying, "I think the execution is dazzling." Tom Glencarney, who plays Aegon, was thrilled with the final result. He said they worked unbelievably hard on creating the armor, the helmet, and everything that goes with it. The attention to detail is mind-blowing. The Conqueror's armor is very heavy, but it looks amazing. Valyrian steel with a crown built into it. It took a while to get it right, but I've never felt more heroic in my life. I'll have more House of the Dragon content coming your way in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, check out my top 10 most compelling men's costumes in House of the Dragon Season 2. Thank you to my patrons for their support and to you for spending time with me. I'll see you in the next video.